Okay, we're going to start right from the beginning with Chapter 1, talking about mental health and mental illness and the difference between the two, and then how we come up with diagnoses for mental illness. I think it's really important that you do watch and listen to the voiceovers. I'll also have some links for you to look at, review. I also think it's really important because things will be brought out in these that you'll see are going to be important parts of your test this semester too. So please make sure you do this, and I think you'll like the outcome. Also, it will help you be better prepared so we can have better discussions in class. Please make sure to write down any questions and things that you would like to discuss in class. And then we also will have some case studies and some reviews and practice NCLEX questions and so forth. So let's get ready and let's get started. Here you're going to see WHO's definition of mental health, and they say it's a state of well-being, and they list some of the attributes of being in a state of well-being. And there's also a YouTube video for you to watch for this slide. Individuals should be able to think rationally and have good communication skills. They should be able to grow emotionally and have the capacity to learn. So not only should individuals show some types of resilience, but they should also have good self-esteem. Some of your attributes for mental health are in Figure 1.1, page 2. And if you look at that, it makes sense, and it's quite straightforward. I know this is a real handsome guy here. Lots of times we want to label individuals who, when they deviate from socially accepted norms, but it doesn't mean that they have a mental illness unless they have a significant disturbance in mental functioning. So even when you see someone like this, we automatically think something's wrong with them, but maybe not. Maybe they're just artistic. So again, we want to make sure that we look at individuals, and a lot of things relate to mental illness, and it can be something that's developmentally. It can come biologically from family and be passed on through genes, or it may be some kind of physiological disturbances that they have. Culturally, we don't know what is normal. What may be normal in another country we might think is a little different. So I want you to look at page 5 and read over that. One of the examples I like to think about, because I remember my parents saying that we kids were always running amok. And actually it's a syndrome in Southeast Asia where you usually see males running around engaging in some type of furious, almost indiscriminate, violent behavior. And they're running amok, and that's where that comes from. On page 3, you have the mental health and the mental illness continuum. So look at that graph, and it kind of tells you the difference between the well-being and normal, healthy individual to those who are all the way to the extreme at the mental illness spectrum. So please look that over. When it comes to resilience, this is a process that people use to adapt to what comes their way. It's someone's ability to secure resources that are needed to support their well-being and the physical resources that actually allow them to move forward successfully. These individuals are still affected by the stressors, but they recognize their feelings, and they can deal with them, and they learn from the experience. So they don't let their negative feelings hold them hostage. And there's actually a resilience factor test if you want to try taking it, and it is on page 5 of your textbook. So I just talked about the DSM-5, and what it is a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental health disorders, and the 5 becomes from, it's the 5th edition. And this is used in nursing, and care is based on responses to an illness. So we don't treat the diagnosed illness, but the problems that are going to be associated with that illness, and still using the nursing process as a guide. So even though we're using mental health, we still have all those nursing diagnoses that are out there. What the DSM-5 does is it describes the criteria. So DSM-5 describes the criteria for 157 disorders to diagnose each mental disorder. It identifies disorders based on, again, the criteria in the clinical setting, whether it is outpatient, inpatient, clinics, or community populations, and so on. So the person is always viewed as a person and not the illness. So you would not say the anorexic. You would say the patient with anorexia or an individual with anorexia. So they're not known as their diagnosis. And remember that we treat the problems associated with the diagnosis and not the diagnostic illness. And again, the DSM-5 describes the criteria of 157 disorders to be able to diagnose them. Something else that's neat is that the diagnoses are organized on a developmental hierarchy. So it goes from, infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, adolescence, through adults, and to your elderly. So it looks at these looks at the developmental hierarchy and the disorders that are normally seen, such as in the infants, the children, and adolescents in the first chapter. Then the disorders are seen later in life or in your further chapters. So a grouping of diagnostic groups as they relate to one another. So you have many disorders that are happening or that are seen in infancy. Then you go to childhood, adolescence, and so forth. So they're grouped together. Right now, for the elderly, the most prevalent disorder in the United States right now, overall, and I'm not even just the elderly, but just the overall, because is Alzheimer's disease. So if someone ever asks you, what is the most prevalent disorder in the United States? It's Alzheimer's. We also have something that's known as the ICD-9-CM. Yeah, say that 3 times fast. But it's the International Classification of Diseases and Clinical Descriptions of Mental and Behavior Disorders. So they have 2 broad classifications, and then they'll have subclassifications. So your 2 classifications are psychosis and neurotic disorders, personality disorders, and other non-psychotic disorders. And those are all under number 2. Your subclassifications are listed under each of these. There's now an ICD-10 that just became into effect in October 2014. That's actually contains 68,000 codes versus the 13,000. This was done to allow it to correspond more to the newer DSM-5. Now there are actually 11 disease classifications of mental health and behavior disorders. As of now, I don't have access to that or in your textbook, so we're going to just keep with the ICD-9 for now until we get access to the ICD-10. So we actually have nurses that go into psychiatric mental health nursing, and by definition they promote mental health through assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of human responses to their mental health problems and psychiatric disorders. Your psychiatric nurse practitioners have diagnostic privileges, and they have prescriptive authority and permission to engage in psychotherapy. They do have an advanced degree, and your advanced practice nurses actually can function autonomously and can prescribe your psychotropic medications depending on the state and eligible specialty privileges for that state. So we do have your psychiatric nurse practitioners, and you'll probably see some when you go to mental health.